All right, let's jump right into this deep dive. And today we're going deep into Guyanese politics.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it is. And to make things even more interesting, we're only using one source material for this whole deep dive.
Really? Just one?
Yep, just one. A press conference given by Dr. Jagdeo, who you know is the General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party.
The PPP? Exactly.
I'm intrigued, though. What makes this one press conference so special that we're basing an entire deep dive on it?
Well, let me tell you, this isn't some boring policy speech.
Okay.
It's Jagdeo, unrestrained, full of personality, sharp jabs at the opposition, and even some eyebrow-raising comments.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Oh, it is. And one of the things that jumps out right away is Jagdeo's laser focus on the 2025 elections, which you know are coming up.
Right.
He's essentially claiming that the opposition, the APNU plus AFC coalition, is already laying the groundwork to challenge the legitimacy of the vote.
So he's saying they're going to cry foul no matter what, even before the first ballot is cast. Pretty much. And to back that up, he keeps bringing up 2020 when they claimed the election was rigged against them.
Trying to preemptively discredit any future claims of fraud.
Exactly. He's like, you cried wolf last time, so no one's going to believe you this time.
That's a bold strategy.
Oh, it is. And he even uses this very specific quote. He says, the threat to the elections did not come from the commission. The threat came from the technical staff, who were identified by the COI as having played a role in rigging the elections in favor of the PNC and AFC.
Whoa, hold on. Can you unpack that for us? What's a COI, and who are these technical staff he's talking about?
Sure. So a COI is a commission of inquiry, basically an official investigation.
Okay.
And in this case, it was set up after the 2020 election to look into all those rigging allegations.
Right.
Now, the technical staff Jagdeo is referring to, those were people who actually run the election, counting votes, managing the voter rolls, that sort of thing.
The nuts and bolts people.
Exactly. And his point seems to be that the system itself is sound, but individuals within the system could potentially mess with the results.
So he's defending the system while pointing fingers at specific people within it.
Yep. It's a nuanced argument for sure.
Definitely. And speaking of the electoral system, Jagdeo also shoots down calls for biometric voting, saying it's not needed and could actually disenfranchise some voters.
This is interesting because biometric voting, like using fingerprints or facial recognition to verify voters, is often seen as a way to make elections more secure.
Absolutely. It's supposed to make it much harder to vote illegally.
So why is Jagdeo so against it?
Well, he brings up a valid point about accessibility, for example. What about people in remote areas who might have limited access to technology, or people whose fingerprints are hard to read because of their work, manual labor?
Right, so it could create barriers for certain groups.
Exactly, and that's something to think about.
For sure. I mean, it seems like there's a balance to be struck between making sure the election is secure and making sure that everyone can vote easily.
Absolutely, and we also can't ignore Jagdeo's political motivations here. Is he truly worried about disenfranchisement, or is he maybe afraid that biometric voting would make it harder for his own party to, let's say, influence the results?
It's a good question, and it's one we should keep in mind as we dig deeper into this press conference.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot more to unpack here.
You said it, like his blistering critique of the opposition's performance during the recent budget debate.
Oh yeah, that's where he really lets loose.
I bet.
He calls them dysfunctional, delusional, dishonest, even incompetent. And it's not just empty insults. No, he gives specific examples to back up his claims.
It's worth noting that this kind of fiery rhetoric is pretty common in Guyanese politics, right?
Oh, for sure. The PPP and the APNU plus AFC, they have a long history of going at each other.
So it's more than just politics, it's personal too.
Oh, absolutely. And this one quote from Jagdeo really sums it up. He says, they elevated the mediocre to great, an expression of great success and achievement, mediocre things.
Wow. So what's he getting at there?
He's basically saying that the opposition cares more about appearances than actually getting things done.
Okay.
Like they'll promote people or policies that sound good on paper, but don't actually deliver.
So he's accusing them of being all style and no substance.
Exactly.
Interesting. So it's not just about broad policy disagreements then. He's getting pretty specific.
Oh, yeah. And he even singles out Kathy Hughes, a prominent opposition member, specifically about her statements on the Amelia Falls hydropower project.
Now, that's a project I've heard a lot about. Can you give us a quick rundown on what that is and why it's so controversial?
Sure. So the Amelia Falls hydropower project was this big idea to provide Guyana with a more reliable and sustainable source of electricity.
Sounds like a good thing.
It was, in theory, but it's been in development forever, like years and years.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Well, it's been hit by all sorts of problems, cost overruns, environmental concerns, and of course, accusations of corruption. Right. And both the PPP and the APNU plus AFC have had their hands in the project at different points.
Ah, so they're both blaming each other for the mess.
Exactly. It's become this political football.
I see. So it's not just about energy policy, it's about power and control.
Absolutely. And Jagdeo uses Hughes' statements about the project to basically attack her credibility and by extension, the credibility of the whole opposition.
Smart, though a bit underhanded.
For sure.
Right.
And he does something similar when he talks about the signing bonus from ExxonMobil and the whole telecommunications liberalization issue.
Okay.
He basically accuses Hughes of twisting the truth in both cases.
Trying to control the narrative.
Exactly. But things get even spicier when he brings up the case of businessman Terrence Campbell and some, shall we say, questionable tax breaks he got.
Oh, this sounds juicy.
It is. So Jagdeo is basically shocked and appalled that Campbell was granted all these tax write-offs, including penalties for unpaid V8 added tax, basically a sales tax.
Right.
So Jagdeo's wondering how the Commissioner General, who's in charge of the tax agency, could sign off on these write-offs without the executive branch knowing.
He smells a rat.
Oh, totally. And he doesn't stop there. He even suggests that what Campbell did might be criminal.
Whoa, hold on. Criminal. That's a big accusation.
It is. He even says what this represents here, in my view, my personal view, is a sort of criminality that goes beyond simple tax evasion.
So what's the significance of this? Why focus on Campbell specifically?
Well, for one, it fits into this larger narrative that Jagdeo is building about corruption and hypocrisy within the opposition and their allies.
Okay.
He points out the irony of Campbell criticizing others for tax evasion while allegedly doing it himself.
So it's a way to paint himself and his party as the good guys fighting against the corrupt elite.
Exactly, and it plays well with his base.
Of course, but let's be real, is Jagdeo's own party squeaky clean when it comes to corruption?
Good point. I mean, Guyanese politics is full of allegations of corruption on both sides.
Right, so it's possible that Jagdeo is using Campbell as a distraction, trying to take the heat off of his own party's potential wrongdoings.
Absolutely, and it also makes you wonder, why Campbell specifically? Is he just an easy target, or is there something more strategic going on here?
Like maybe Campbell is connected to some big players in the opposition, and by attacking him, Jagdeo is trying to weaken their support.
It's definitely a possibility, and it highlights how personal and complex Guyanese politics can be.
Absolutely. And we're just scratching the surface here. There's so much more to unpack in this press conference.
Oh, yeah. We've got Jagdeo's broader critiques, his vision for Guyana, and what all of this means for the election.
It's going to be a wild ride.
You can say that again. And it looks like Jagdeo isn't finished yet. He sets his sights on a group he calls fake intellectuals and losers.
Oh, this is going to be interesting.
Right. Accusing them of being elitist and out of touch with the everyday Guyanese people.
It's interesting how he broadens his attack here. It's not just the political opposition anymore.
Right. He's drawing a line between, like, the real Guyanese and this elite class that he sees as phony.
Okay. And he gets pretty specific too, right?
Yeah, he calls out Glenn Lowell, Nigel Hughes, and Kemraj Ramjatan.
Those are some big names.
They are, and he gives examples of their alleged hypocrisy and opportunism, like, it gets personal.
It does make you wonder if this is really about the issues or just about settling scores.
It's hard to say, right?
Yeah.
But to really understand why these attacks might resonate with some people, we need to know a bit more about who these guys are.
Right, like what's their story and what's their history with Jagdeo?
Exactly. Can you give us some background?
Sure. So Glenn Lowell is a big name in media. He owns the Kaitur News, which has been pretty critical of the government.
Ah, so he's a thorn in Jagdeo's side.
You could say that. And then you have Nigel Hughes. He's a well-known attorney who's represented opposition figures in a bunch of legal cases.
Okay, so he's on the other side of the fence, too.
Definitely. And lastly, there's Kemraj Ramjatan, a politician and a former member of the APNU plus AFC coalition.
So they've all clashed with Jagdeo before.
They have. They've been vocal critics of his policies, and he's accused them of having their own agendas.
It's a tangled web for sure.
Yeah.
Makes it tough to separate the politics from the personal.
Absolutely. But amidst all this negativity, Jagdeo does take a moment to highlight some positive stuff in the budget.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
He talks about increased funding for community initiatives, things like garbage collection and cemetery maintenance.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom.
Right. It's like he's trying to balance out all the attacks with some good news. showing that his government is getting things done.
Right, reminding people that they're not just about fighting the opposition.
Exactly. And he also complains that these positive things are often overlooked by the opposition and the media.
Always playing the victim card.
Well, it's a common tactic, trying to get public sympathy by saying, no one appreciates all the good work I'm doing.
And it's especially effective in an election year.
Absolutely. Every word is calculated.
But he's also been pretty vague on the specifics, like he talks about tax cuts and development plans, but without much detail.
That's interesting. Do you think it's deliberate?
Maybe. Could be a way to stay flexible and adapt his message as the campaign goes on.
Right. Or maybe he doesn't want to give his opponents too much to attack.
It's a risky game, though. If he waits too long, people might think he's not being sincere.
True. There's a balance between being strategic and being transparent.
So what's your take? Is he holding back for a reason, or is he just all talk?
It's hard to say. We'll have to wait and see how his campaign unfolds.
Okay, fair enough. Well, this press conference has definitely given us a lot to think about.
No kidding. We've seen Jagdeo at his best and his worst. The accusations, the justifications, his vision for the future.
But what does it all mean for the average Guyanese?
That's the question, isn't it?
And what does it mean for the upcoming election?
That's what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Can't wait. Stay tuned, folks. All right, so we've really dug into this press conference from Jagdeo, all the fiery rhetoric, the attacks on the opposition, even his vision for Guyana.
Yeah, it's been quite a ride.
But now it's time to figure out what it all means, especially with the election coming up.
Right, like how does this all connect to the bigger picture?
Exactly, because this isn't just some abstract political game.
Oh no, this is real life with real consequences for the Guyanese people.
And the tension is real. Jagdeo seems absolutely convinced that the opposition is going to try to mess with the vote.
Well, he's been hammering that point home, bringing up the 2020 election over and over again.
It's like he's trying to plant that seed of doubt in everyone's mind.
And discredit any challenges to the results before they even happen.
Exactly. It's a classic tactic, but it also shows how deep the distrust runs between these two parties.
It goes way beyond policy differences, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's about who have the right to rule, who controls the resources, like the very foundations of democracy in Guyana are at stake.
And that leads us to the big question, what's really at stake in this election?
Right, because it's about more than just who wins and loses. It's about two different visions for Guyana.
Okay, so what's Jagdeo's vision?
Well, he paints this picture of a country on the rise, economic growth, new infrastructure, social programs, the whole shebang.
And he's positioning himself as the guy who can deliver it all.
The strong, experienced leader, the only one who can get it done.
But I'm guessing the opposition has a different take.
Of course, they're saying that Jagdeo's vision is built on corruption, that it only benefits the wealthy and connected.
They point to examples like those Terrence Campbell tax breaks, right?
Exactly. They're saying it's a rigged system.
So it's a classic battle of narratives, two sides fighting to control the story.
And it's up to the Guyanese people to decide who they believe.
And this where you, the listener, come in what has stood out to you during this deep dive. Who seems more credible?
Right. What else would you want to know to really understand what's going on?
Because at the end of the day, this isn't about Jagdeo or the opposition. It's about the future of Guyana.
And it's about holding leaders accountable, demanding transparency, and having those tough conversations.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final thought to chew on.
Okay, hit us with it.
Jagdeo keeps saying that the opposition's call for biometric voting is just a ploy to undermine the election.
Right. He's been pretty vocal about that.
So is he being genuine? Is it a legitimate concern? Or is it just a way to deflect from other issues?
And what about the balance between security and accessibility in elections? How can Guyana ensure that everyone gets to vote fairly and easily?
These are tough questions with no simple answers.
So we encourage you to dig deeper, do your own research, talk to people, and most importantly, make your voice heard.
Because the future of Guyana is in your hands.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Guyanese politics. It's been a fascinating and complex journey.
It has, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a new topic.
Until then, stay curious and stay engaged.